Yes, I see that we're alive and people are starting to join. We'll give everybody a little bit more time to uh, come in. I hope everybody is having a lovely Thursday. I think it's Thursday. Yes, it's Thursday. It's always the December month is always interesting to keep track of the days. I think everybody's very busy with all wrapping up all the bits before Christmas, or maybe even during Christmas. Uh,
Hey
do you?
everybody.
How is it for you, Olivia? Do you have a lot of
Oh
work
my
running
gosh.
over to Christmas, or?
It's absolutely crazy. It's like a rush to get everything done before the holidays. And I was mentioning last night to my husband, I said, if you were to tell me that December would be this busy, I would have not believed you. So it's been very, very busy. We are in the process of completing a bunch of deadlines before the 19th. And then we are shutting down for the last 2 weeks of the holiday so we can enjoy time with our families and friends. So I'm really looking forward to that.
So you think it will you'll be able to really shut down, or do you think work
I
will
will
run
have to.
over it?
Yes, I did actually give my clients the heads up, like just so you know, those last 2 weeks we are closed. So we need to respect that time for everybody on the team, and make sure that everybody gets a chance to get some rest, have some fun over the holidays, and then be back in full force the first week of January. So I did give the heads up so that everybody's aware, and also to be able to manage people's expectations and mine as well. I mean, I'll be checking emails here and there, but no active projects will be worked on.
Smart, smart. I try to do the same. I think we can kick it off. I see a lot of people have already joined, and maybe some more will join us later. Welcome everyone. Glad that you're able to make it in these busy times. With me is my name is Matthijs Huiskamp. I'm the founder of Altura. We host these sessions quite often, so definitely join our LinkedIn page to keep up to date about all the events and webinars that we're organizing. Today with me is Olivia Bahrami. She is the founder and owner of the RFP House, which is a boutique proposal management firm supporting both small and mid-sized organizations in winning and also retaining more businesses through the RFP process. Olivia has 15 years of experience, both as an individual contributor in BIDS and as a senior leader. So she brings deep expertise across both the private and the public sector. And she founded the RFP House to use all of her experience and knowledge to help companies improve their proposal quality and strengthen their positioning. And that's with the goal to drive growth. And that's also what we're diving into today. How can you learn from Olivia? Welcome, and let's kick it off, Olivia. We'll
Thank you
have a
so much.
Q&A at the end,
Yeah,
but
that's great.
let's.
And I just want to say thank you for Altura for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm excited to go over our content, and looking forward to sharing, some thoughts, some tips and tricks. And this is really a conversation. I'm sure Matthias will have some great information to share as well from his perspective and what he's learned over the years. So looking forward to the discussion. Yeah. Okay. So I think we are ready to get into our deck, which we will go through together. So thank you so much. There we go. We've got our first slide here. So really do you want me to kick it off, Matthias, and then we'll get into, yeah, sounds good.
Let's go.
Perfect. Awesome. So one of the things that, when Altura and I spoke about, a potential topic to chat about through this or at this masterclass, the first thing that came to my mind is this, I developed something called the proposal writing success formula. And it sounds probably a little bit more complicated than it actually is, but I'm a big fan of keeping things simple, keeping things organized and easy to follow, particularly in the world of bids, proposals, which can be very complex, can be very frustrating, can be very complicated. It typically involves many stakeholders, so there's a lot of moving pieces that tend to be quite complex. There's a lot to account for. So I decided to create something that first to help myself through the proposal writing process and to really achieve more success along the way. And what I did, and I'm a big fan of like using numbers and letters that help me remember what I want to do. So in this case, I developed the 3 C's, which is, to create responses that are clear, concise, and compelling. And by the way, this formula, if you want to call it a formula, this can work across other avenues as well. It's not strictly based to proposal writing. It can be used for presentations. So if you're working on shortlist presentations for your clients or internally in your organization, or perhaps you're, working on some marketing materials, sales brochures, whatever that looks like, these can be used across the board. So really the point of this is that they're transferable from proposal management to other, sales enablement or marketing specific works. So the 3 C's are clear, concise, and compelling. And we're going to dive into the first one, which is clear. So what does it mean to create a clear response? What are we looking at here? So again, because I'm a fan of keeping things simple and not to have a huge number of requirements or like things to be aware of, something that you can remember, that you can check off your list. These are the 3 kind of best practices that I developed when we're trying to create clear responses. So what's the first best practice is to be direct, to address the questions head on and not dance around the question. Sometimes you do have to dance around questions depending on the requirements and how the question is laid out. But think about the buying organizations, right? The procurement team that has put out this RFP. They are going through several submissions, including yours. And it's incumbent upon us as the writers and as the owners of the proposal process to be direct, address questions head on, and then determine later if there's any opportunity to add additional information. But table stakes is be direct, answer the questions. And sometimes, as we know, there could be multiple questions, right, that are positioned in one giant question. I'm sure we've all seen that. So make sure that you address everything in a very clear, easy to understand way. The next best practice is to keep responses simple and organized, right? It's making sure that you're using various headings, you're using a clear font, you're having distinction between your fonts, that they're easy to read, easy to digest, and that they're simple to go through. Sometimes, I've seen proposals in the past that have a giant block of text like this long, and you're trying to fish for the response that you're looking for, and that can be very frustrating and difficult. Again, if we're putting ourselves in the shoes of the buyer or the procurement person or whoever is responsible for running the RFP, we need to think about them. We need to make it simple for them to find our responses. And then last but not least, I'm a big fan of this, is like, let's not use overly complicated formalized words. So for example, instead of saying utilize, just say use, right? Try to keep it clear, keep it simple, use simple terms. The people that are evaluating our responses are people just like us. So we need to make our submissions reader friendly, easy to digest, and simple. So those are my 3 clear C's for the first C, clear. These are my 3 best practices. Matthias, your thoughts?
Yeah,
love to hear.
Yeah, what I often hear as well is, right, you say you want to be clear in answering the question. I think it's, first of all, really also you need to make sure that you understand a question really well, right?
Yes.
You mentioned you need to place yourself in at the buyer. You need to understand what are they really asking here, because if you don't know what they're asking, you can't really answer the question really clear. And that is also what the buyer is looking for in the RFP, right? In your proposal, they want to see, okay, this is what I'm looking for. How are they going to do it without a lot of fuss, without a lot of unclarity, without very convoluted big pieces of text? How do you feel? Do you have any best practices tips when somebody receives a very complex RFP with a lot of hard questions to understand, what's the best approach there to still get clarity in your proposal?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matthias. I would say break it down in very easy to digest pieces. So first of all, you need to understand the content, right? That's very important. Proposal writers, managers, proposal professionals, they're not experts in what a subject matter expert does. We're not experts in that. We're experts in the process, right? The proposal management process, how to drive it, how to respond to the questions, how to position things. That's our expertise. So the first thing is you need to understand the content. That's incredibly important. If you don't understand the content, that's where you need to have a conversation with your SME or SMEs to really understand the questions or the content that is being presented to you. And then our job is to break down the content in easy to understand terminology. So, first of all, understanding the content starts with you, and then addressing things by using like headings or breaking it down so that, again, we're thinking about the end user. The end user is the buyer, right? Or the evaluation team. So just look at that bulk content and try to just break it down one by one and see if there's any patterns too. I actually use this as sort of a best practice. Is there any pattern that I can pick up on in this bulk content that I can break down that follows a nice, consistent approach? That is also important because the more consistency we have overall in the overall presentation of the proposal, the better we'll be off. I mean, it is a big thing to keep in mind, so that, again, we position our responses in an easy to understand and easy to read manner. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and I think that's also when you have written that first draft, you should always go back and be like, hey, what is that question behind the question that the buyer has?
That's a great point.
If I read through it, do I get that that question answered? I also see here in the chat from Jane and we talk about avoiding overly formal words. Jane mentions to also do not use passive tense. It removes the actor and makes it unclear what you are taking responsibility for. People also want to be given the confidence, right? Or this supplier is going to really solve it for us.
Absolutely.
Show some proof. Show some.
I love that. I absolutely love it. I totally agree. Yeah.
And then one more from Michelle I see is, I wish the procurement teams would apply the same rules and not use overly complex words as well. What's your experience there?
Oh my gosh, I completely agree. Thank you for the comment. It's funny because when I think about procurement professionals, by their very nature, they're formal, right? Whenever you read an RFP, even before you know who is procuring it, if it's a procurement person or someone else, it could be, a department, for example, or a client. By the first few sentences, I can kind of tell, okay, this was formulated by a procurement person, because a lot of times, as we know, they'll add in a bunch of attachments that have nothing to do with the scope of work, right? It's just like general, terms and conditions, or a massive MSA, master services agreement, that has nothing to do with the scope of work. So they're just doing their job, right? But, sometimes what we can do, and again, this depends on the client, depends on the industry. There's a lot of things to account for, but maybe that's something that we can share with them as, potential best practices of how to better implement an RFP process, right? Is make it easy for us as well to understand your requirements and make it simple. Don't include anything that isn't applicable to the scope of work that is being procured. So I agree. It goes both ways for sure.
Yeah, I've actually seen some initiatives here with the Dutch government where they're trying to bring the tender document back to a max of 6 pages. Like, what's the essence of this tender? I think there is also a bit of difference, right? If you're selling to public or to private, there is some more wiggle room in the private sector. I think that's,
and they tend to
also
be simpler. I mean, it's not a general rule, but they tend to be simpler. RFPs that are procured by private companies tend to be simpler, with less forms that you have to fill out. At least that's been in my experience, and particularly in Canada and the US. In Europe, to some extent. I mean, it depends very much on the organization, but they tend to be easier to go through, easier to understand. And there is more flexibility that is presented as well, because a lot of times, in a procurement RFP, they'll have a character limit or a word limit and say, you need to keep your responses to 250 words or, 300 characters or whatever. Not to say that private companies don't do that. Of course they do sometimes, but I do see that more as I do see more of that as a theme in the public sector opportunities that we work on.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. I see one more question also. I'm just taking the questions now. I think it's nice to while we're at the right seat. Luke is asking, do you think questions should be answered in the order in which they are asked, or is it acceptable to deviate from that?
Great question. As a best practice, and my response, I'm basing it on what works, again, from my experience, for proposal writers, for their own process workflow, and also for the evaluation team. I would say, and I would highly suggest, you answer the questions in the order in which they're asked. That way it's a good sanity check too for you, right? As the person responding to the question. As I mentioned earlier, there could be, 3 or 4 questions in one, or, you have a giant, items, or, items A to G, address all the items A to G. So if you do that one by one, item A with the title and then the response, I think that is a very well organized approach. So I'm a big fan of do exactly as you're told in the RFP, based on the order in which they present the RFP document and questions. That way, they also see that you're following their instructions and that you're doing what you're told, so to speak. And that kind of sounds a little bit weird, right? Do as you're told. But in the context of an RFP, you actually have to, if you want to get to the next stage of the process. So now I will say it is acceptable to deviate in some cases. So if we're talking about private sector, where they have a little bit more flexibility, the way in which they present the information might be a little bit flexible. So for example, let's say they don't have RFP questions, so to speak, but they have a scope of work that they've included with items 1 to 5. Here's the phases of the project or the scope of work. Maybe that's a way in which you can also deviate. But again, as a best practice, I would defer to answering questions in the order in which they're asked.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it does happen, especially in the public tenders, where you basically are given 2 pages to answer 8 complex questions. Sometimes you need to kind of deviate to make it all fit in the space that you have. But if you are not limited, it always makes sense to just follow it as to the letter as possible, because again, then the buyer understands it better, finds
absolutely
their questions.
Let's
move on to the
I was just going to say, are we ready to move on to Concise? Okay, awesome. Okay, so the second C is Concise. So what are we looking for here? Okay, I may have mentioned earlier off the top, right, when I spoke to your team, Matthias, I said I'm a big fan of less is more in responses where it makes sense. Now, I will say I'm a fan of more is less when I gather information from clients, from subject matter experts, because there might be something in there that they send to us that helps with our understanding process. So it might not be something that we apply in a response, but it's good for our awareness. It might help with the drafting process. So as it pertains to responding to RFP questions or RFI questions or any bid that you're working on, less is more. And this kind of ties back into being clear, right? Is being, addressing the questions. Don't give more than what you're asked. In fact, I'm actually wrapping up an RFP where they have the statement that says, elaborate and general marketing material is highly discouraged. And then there's been other RFPs where they say, we don't want any marketing materials. We don't want any other additional information unless we have specifically requested it. So if they request, things like reports or an implementation plan or an org chart of your account team, whatever they're asking for, give it to them, right? Give it to them. But focus on what the requirements are, deliver on those requirements, talk about what the value of those requirements are and how you're able to deliver your solution. But don't go beyond that. Right? And every RFP is different. Every opportunity is different. There may be opportunities to present more information in other opportunities, but maybe the one that you're working on today doesn't fit that, right? So less is more. Prioritize what matters most. Again, this goes into the whole prioritize what you're being asked, how you're asked, right? So when they ask about, they ask, do you have this process? Yes. What does that process look like? Describe what that process looks like so that you're prioritizing what they're asking you to deliver. That's really important. And then, eliminate filler words, basically, generally, just, typically. That leaves room for ambiguity. That leaves room for interpretation. If we're leaving our proposal responses up to the interpretation of the buyer, that's actually not a good thing. We need to set the tone. We need to educate and demonstrate what our solution is and how it's valuable, how it delivers impact and outcomes for our buyers, for our clients, for our organizations. So try it again, be direct, eliminate filler words. This almost looks, when I see these kinds of filler words in responses, I feel like it's kind of an elementary based first pass at a draft. It gives me that sentiment that it's like, no, we need to get rid of that. And we use this in day-to-day conversations. That's normal. But when you're putting together a business proposal, a professional request for a proposal response, that needs to read differently. So that's the concise, the three items on concise.
I think for me, it also ties back to the having that clarity. If you don't understand what's being asked, you will probably move into a more fuzzy, word-rich answer. But if you know exactly, okay, this is what they're asking, this is why they're asking it, you can really turn it, okay, this is how we will approach it. This is, you can add proof, you can get it very to the point. And often, word count is a challenge, right? We collaborate with SMEs. They like to be very fuzzy and write down a lot of words, but saying very little. Comments from Howard as well. He says, I don't give an SME the word count to start with. That's my job to fit their content into it.
You got it. You got it.
Yeah.
I fully agree. And, I was thinking about this the other day. Before we had access to all of these wonderful AI tools that can help us summarize this, 500 word response into 250 words. I remember those days when it was manual and you had to redo the response yourself, right? You had to do it. You had to maintain the messaging, but remove some of that fluff so that it fits within that 250 word requirement. But now we have AI to do that for us. And of course, we still need to review and proofread and make sure that it still captures the essence. But we have these tools now that allows us to do that work. So I fully agree. I don't give any of our SMEs restrictions on, right? I might give them some guidelines because I think guidelines help them as well. Because sometimes they'll say, how detailed should this be? What sort of information should I be covering? So guidelines work. And then with that information, we're able to, to consolidate what we need so that it fits for the RFP requirements.
How do you, of course, the AI is a great tool to summarize, and sometimes you need to cut words. You need to reduce. What's kind of a good test to decide, hey, what should stay and what should go?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, let's say there's two paragraphs, right? The first paragraph answers the question. The second paragraph is more kind of, I don't know if I would call it necessarily fluff, but it's it's good to, again, it's good to substantiate the response, but it might not be necessary, or it might not fit within that, right? I might extract a sentence from there, or I might extract the words that I need, and then I put it into that first paragraph and then get rid of the rest. And it varies, right? From opportunity to opportunity. They're all a little bit different. They all have different requirements. So I just use my best judgment based on, here's the question, here's how we need to answer it. Are we answering the question? And then all this other information that the SME provided, that's great for my awareness. It's great for my knowledge, but is it relevant in the context of responding to this RFP question? So I kind of make the decision, and I obviously let them know, like, here's, just so you know, here's the final response that we're going with, and we're going with it because, you know, it still answers the question, but we removed the additional information. And most SMEs actually appreciate that, because it helps them for the next time when they work with us. They have a reference point for, I'm like, okay, next time I'll keep that in mind. So it's, you know, with SMEs, and that's a whole nother conversation we have another time. But SMEs, you know, we need to educate them. We need to guide them. We need to tell them what we need. And also having good relationships with our SMEs, to me, is a non-negotiable. They're part of the team that puts together the proposals. They contribute their knowledge, their content. So, you know, RFPs are, and I say this all the time, proposals are a team sport. It's the work of many, not of one. It's the work of many, not of one, right?
Definitely. I think having great SME collaboration and being able to work with the same people in the organization definitely helps. Also to get better input and to just get to that final version a lot faster. Another great question from Luke, I'll put it up on the screen, is this: regarding less is more, what is preferable, text or a graphical solution? We often get this question, are we going for text, or are we going to make a nice infographic? When do we decide what to use? What's your
great
opinion?
Question. Yeah. So, you know, sometimes we don't have the option, right? You have those terrible Excel spreadsheets that you have to comply with. So text, right? So in those cases, text. But if you do have, you know, if it's a PDF document and they're giving you the option to submit what you'd like, and you can work in Word and put in graphics and tables and charts and all sorts of wonderful imagery or images, which I'm a huge fan of, by the way. I tend to have a balance between text and visuals when I'm given that opportunity, right? Like, so again, as I said, if it's a Word document that we can just PDF and submit that way, then I do that. So I would say, in the context of less is more, I would err more on the visual side as opposed to text. But again, it depends on how the RFP instructions are formulated, and what you can do and what you can't do in the context of those questions.
And for me, it's again also about what's clear, right? If a good test, something to ask yourself, hey, if I would this paragraph, if I would turn it into an image, what is easier to understand? Can I give more information in this space? It's a good one. I can write 1 or 2 paragraphs in the place I can put an image. But it also really depends, in my opinion, on what is more clear. Is it clear if I show it? There's a lot of people try to use images because they like using images. That's often not a good reason. But you can also, if you have the resource to create an image quite easily, you can do a bit of A/B testing as well internally. Be like, hey, I have this paragraph of text and I have this image, which makes it easier for you to understand. Again, you want the reader to really grasp the essence of what you're saying that is tying back to their question behind their question.
That's a really good point. Exactly. It's right. It's putting yourself in that position of, is this clear or is it more complicated? Is it just, as you said, like Matthias, am I just putting that image because it's nice or because I want to put it in there? But if we're thinking about, for example, like an implementation chart, right? Some organizations, you know, attach these massive Gantt charts. There's no need for that unless, of course, that's required. If you keep it simple, if you keep a visual that shows the steps, right? Like, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you provide some bullet points to accompany the visual, that's a better way to digest that information, again, in the context of a proposal, than this massive, appendix that you have to touch separately, and it's you don't know where to look because it's so confusing and it's hard to read. So again, prioritize what matters most, for sure, and think about how is your submission going to be perceived, right? And a lot of times what you can do is share with your internal stakeholders, like, give me your honest feedback, take a look at this, and what are your thoughts? If you were sitting down and reviewing this, how would you perceive it? Would it leave you with a good impression? Would it leave you with oh my gosh, I don't know where to find this information, it's disorganized, it's too much text, or the visuals look great, but I don't really understand them? Like, really put yourself in the position of the others, right? That are evaluating your document.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's
All
also
right.
a nice this bridge to our last C. Making
Let's
it
do it. Compelling. Love this one. Okay. So what are we talking? Oh, hold on a second. That's not the right one. That should say compelling. But anyway, that's fine. So compelling, when we're talking about compelling, what we want to do is, again, it starts with understanding the organization's needs, understanding their requirements. Sometimes you need to do a little bit of research to understand them, right? So again, now we have these amazing AI tools that helps us generate that information, right? Like, put together a one-pager for me on, this client, tell me about their business objectives, tell me about their 5-year plan, tell me about their ESG strategies, tell us about what we need to know so that we're empowered to put together a compelling response. So when it comes to executive summaries, when it comes to responding to RFP questions, customize your content to the prospect opportunity, to their industry, to their objectives and goals, because that tends to land very well. And I think many of us in proposal management already do that, but sometimes we get carried away and we tend to focus too much on ourselves and what we can do and how great we are and how many awards we won and all of this important information. But in the context of the client, I don't know if they care that much that you won all of these awards unless they're asking for it. I mean, right? So always defer to creating content that is client friendly. I like to call it that way. Client friendly. That is client directed, client obsessed, client focused. So customize it accordingly so that it meets the prospect's opportunities, goals, because they care about themselves. They care about, how can I solve this problem? That's why they're going out to RFP. They need a solution. So how can we demonstrate that we can, deliver on that solution? The next thing is demonstrate your unique value proposition. I'm a huge fan of this, the UVP. Every organization has their own unique value proposition. Now, that doesn't mean that they understand or truly know what their UVP is, because it's not that easy to really uncover it, particularly if you're in a market where your competitors do exactly the same thing, but deliver things differently, right? They deliver the same product, the same service, but they do a little bit differently. Or you're not clear on how to explain what your UVP is. So when you're doing this exercise, and I'm a big fan of including C-suite, marketing, sales, all the right parties to determine what that UVP is, again, in the context of a proposal. Now, you can use your UVP in presentations as well, for sure. But if we're talking about proposals today, you need to understand what is different about you. And some things that you think are different about you are actually not. Or what you think is unique about your organization is actually not. And that can be hard to hear, but it's the truth for some organizations. So it becomes an exercise where you really got to dig deep and understand what is different about us and why should the buyer care about that? How is it aligned with what they're looking for, right? How is it aligned with their objectives, their requirement, the RFP question, and where they're looking to go? Maybe they're looking to develop a new program and they're looking to you to demonstrate that you can do that for them. So it's really important to do this exercise of understanding and communicating, right? It's understanding and communicating your unique value proposition in a way that is easy to digest for the end user. And then last but not least, I absolutely love this. Whenever you're creating content, whether it's, an exec summary, a proposal response, anything within the context of an RFP, ask yourself this question or these questions. So what? Why am I putting this information in? Like, why? Why should they care? Why should they care about what I'm telling them through these words, through this statement, through this scope? And why is that important for them to consider? So these questions actually help you tie back their objectives, their description of what they're looking for, and how you're able to do that and why they should care. What is the impact of what you're delivering? What is the outcome of what you're delivering? Why should they select you as the organization for the contract instead of your competitors? So it's really important to, again, make it simple for them to evaluate you, make it simple for them to choose you, right? These are really, really important things to keep in mind as we're responding to RFPs.
What I also, if you talk about compelling, I think people want to feel heard. They want to feel special. I once spoke to one of this customer, Altura client, who always, when they were able to do it, they would design the proposal in such a way with the brand colors, with the kind of like the brand book of the customer in mind,
Yes.
right? So that they can really, it's like, wow, this is made for us. Often we don't have that much time or resources. Do you have a tip on what a team can do to customize it to the customer that are not a big time investment?
Yeah. One of the things that you can use, well, there's a couple of things. I'll go with the first one. I think that's probably the better one. Is one of the things that I do, and I'll give an example, is not only reading and understanding for myself before anybody else, reading and understanding the RFP requirements. And as I'm going through those requirements, what I like to do is highlight and make comments for myself, whether it's in a PDF document, in a Word document, or I also like, the old paper and pen. I'm a big fan of that, and putting bullet points of key things that I want to ensure that I put into the executive summary or somewhere in a proposal response or in one of the questions that really speaks to the solution. So I like to just, when I'm starting to review, I also start to strategize. So I think about, okay, I'm going to need this information so I can start putting together the exec summary or the response. The other thing that you could do is, if you're using a secure, and I use that word because it's important, a secure AI platform, you can upload the RFP document only if it's secure and is encrypted and is only available to your organization, and give the AI a prompt and say, I'm uploading this RFP. I'm responding to this RFP for such and such scope. Please, break down for me the 5 key objectives, goals, strategies that the client has for this project. So you can use tools at your disposal, whether it's, doing highlights like I do, and that might be a little bit old school, I don't know, but I like it because I think it helps my process. Everybody's different, but you can use AI as well. You can use different tools to help you gather those details, so that when it's time to customize, when you've already got your boilerplate content, you can start customizing it according to that client. That way you're saving time. And let me tell you, the way we used to do things 10, 15 years ago is not the way we're doing things now. So we're quicker, we're more agile, and we have more available at our disposal. So that's how I would approach that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we see that in Altura as well. We have our bit companion who helps do analytics on documents. And we see that out of the prompt library, one of the most used is that review prompt that basically looks at the RFP and at your proposal and see, okay, is this compelling? And you can it will help you to sharpen the message. We got a question from Joe. Who do you think reads the executive summary and how much it matters, if not specifically marked?
Yeah, great question. Who do you think reads the executive? So do you mean who do I think reads the executive summary from the client side?
I think.
And how much is that? Is that how you interpret that, Joe?
So,
If that's if that's the question, we don't know. The answer is we don't know, right? We might have an idea. It might be, okay, thank you. Yeah. It might be the procurement person, or they might not look at that. Maybe procurement is only looking at pricing because they don't care about anything, right? It does vary from organization to organization. I've seen RFPs where they list the group of evaluators. This person for procurement, this person from IT, this person from HR, right? So every RFP is a little bit differently. And what you can do is through the question and answer period, which we're often given, is can you tell us without saying who do you think, who's reading the executive summary when we're submitting it? Instead of positioning it that way, what you can ask is, could you please tell us a little bit about the evaluation team, right? So that you kind of gather, okay, who am I positioning my proposal for? Is it strictly just procurement where they only care about certain components? Or is it multiple evaluators that have different interests, right? As I said, it might be someone in IT who has very specific requirements and wants to see that you've completed your security questionnaire and all those 200 questions, right? Or is it someone else that is a little bit more strategic? Maybe it's a C-suite individual. So it really does vary. There is no black and white answer. It's very nuanced, as is the world of proposals. And in terms of how much does it matter, I think in some RFPs it matters more than in others. I will be completely transparent about that. I think in some cases it's simply not required, and maybe a cover letter suffices. And in other situations, for example, let's say one of your existing clients is going out to rebid. So they're going out to bid for the same scope of work that you're currently delivering for them as the incumbent. In that case, it is much more important because what you need to do is highlight all of the great work that you've done for them, how long you've been partners for. There's a lot of things to account for in what I call a retender opportunity or a rebid opportunity. Those are obviously managed in a totally different way than a new opportunity altogether. So it does, again, it varies from opportunity to opportunity. But if we're proactive in asking, if it's not clear to us, who's involved on the other side, I think we are empowering ourselves with that information, and it helps us to drive the proposal process internally a little bit more efficiently as well. Hopefully that helps.
Great. I think it's time to move to the Q&A.
All right, let's do it.
Who has any questions for Olivia and me on any of the 3 C's or anything else related to what we've just discussed?
Yeah. We covered quite a lot of good stuff, and Matthias, you had some really good points too. What you said earlier, just as we're waiting for the questions, I love that you said, customizing the template, like the proposal template with colors and perhaps fonts, or to the client, right? Or if you're bidding on a really iconic brand, let's say for Starbucks or something, right? Or a very famous restaurant, having those colors and images of individuals that are delivering those services, I think is really, really cool. It really shows a level of effort and awareness that sometimes can be the differentiator, right? I've seen that work very, very well in the past. When you put that level of effort into the overall look and feel, into the first impression of your proposal, it goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely. I think it also really depends on, again, for me, it's really much, do we understand the client really well? And this is also, we've touched upon a lot of other topics in these webinars as well. One of them has been always, are we well connected to the sales team? Do we already see opportunity coming up before it's being sent out? Do we have that relationship already there? And when we have all of that information, and when we also have the timeline, where we have the time to really dive deep, it allows us to get a better tailored proposal out. And I think if we're able to tailor that proposal, not only by answering the question, but also how we deliver it, how it looks, how it feels, that makes a big difference in your chances to win.
Yep.
I see a few questions coming in. One from Petra about, yes, correct. We had Petra asked about the last slide was about compelling. There was a little mistake in the title. That was not concise. So we went to clear, concise, and the last one was compelling. So now we're at the Q&A. Arjan, one question for Matthijs. Can Altura help with infographics now or in the future? So from a technical standpoint on like creating infographics, that's not something that we are focusing on with Altura. So creating infographics is not within our focus. So I'm curious to understand more what you try to accomplish there. What we do see is people trying to turn text in, okay, how can we tell this better? And also get an idea for what an infographic would look like. It is quite challenging also to use AI to turn it into an infographic, right? Because you really want to have that information correct. So often we see customers still using their in-house or external designers. Of course, there are a lot of AI tools out there that help you create a first basic infographic. Another one from Michelle. Any advice for someone new to a specialized sector, for example, health tech? How much do I really need to understand to deliver a compelling proposal?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle, for the question. That's a great question. That's a very subjective thing too, right? Because we all interpret how much information we really need to understand differently, right? And I think that only comes with experience, is figuring out how much do I need to know about a particular topic. I would say, health tech. So I work in HR, health and like employee health and wellness programs, and corporate mobility, or global relocation, as we also call it, corporate global mobility. I think with any industry, there's a learning curve. Let's just acknowledge that, right? And I would say if I were to give a number or a percentage, I would say you need to understand between 70 to 80% of the content, so that you are empowered to describe it in simple terms. Because if it's already complicated to understand, right? If there's a learning curve with that, even for the people that are reviewing your proposal, we need to understand the content so that we're able to explain it in a simple way. And I would rely very much on your SMEs. I would rely on your leader. I would rely on people around you that are contributing this content to help you understand that content and have them explain it to you if it's not already clear, right? Perhaps it's a matter of doing some training. It's a matter of maybe doing a job shadowing, doing some courses. I don't know what that looks like for you, but there's different things that you could arm yourself with to feel more prepared and more confident to deliver a compelling proposal.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps, right? But I also feel like if you look at often the career paths of bid managers, they tend to sometimes completely go into a different sector, and then 40 years later go into another sector as well. So I think the bid management role, the bid writer role, is also very much being able to do that proper project management, that stakeholder management, those analytics skills that you need to really, like we talked about, understanding what's being asked, knowing who to talk to internally. Of course, it helps, and you kind of like build that muscle as you go through multiple RFPs. Actually, also talk to many bid writer consultants, and someone's like, yeah, I know about so many different markets a little bit right now just because I get this input. So I think, yes, it's important, but it's not the most important thing to be successful as a proposal writer.
I agree. And if I can just add one more thing, what you mentioned, Matthijs, is so important, because in proposal management, there's transferable skills that you build over the years, right? And you're right. Like, even for myself, I've worked in different industries in proposal management, and you do have to learn the subject matter, but that takes time. And then, as I said, there's people around you that can help you with that as well. So I would say lean on your transferable skills that you've learned to help guide you and also to ground you through the process. And then it becomes easier to learn the content as you go along.
Yeah, great. Another question from, there we go, from Wilke. In our organization, we often ask colleagues to read through our proposals to help us optimize them. Yeah. How can you ensure that colleagues do not just comment on what's already there, but challenge them to suggest improvements to text that you have not included in your proposal yourself?
Yeah, great question. I would say, well, a couple of things. The first thing that comes to mind is this a cultural thing? Meaning, is that kind of expectation communicated from leadership? So, for example, it's not just a matter of, right, what's already there, as you mentioned in your question, but challenge them to suggest improvements. Is that embedded in your culture, in your organizational culture? If it isn't, it should, if that's what you're looking for. And then also, when you have them review your proposals, give them guidelines on what you expect them to do. So, for example, I say, in addition to what we've already presented in the proposal, we would love to see your suggestions for future improvements. So whether it's a matter of using a different template, approaching a proposal in a different manner, coordinating with perhaps even doing like a peer review. So I'm a big fan of like peer review. So if I'm the proposal writer focusing on the bid, I would need a peer reviewer. So whether that is the salesperson, whether that is another proposal writer, to review my work. So I think it starts, as I said, with leadership, with culture, embedding that into your organization. And it can be obviously beyond proposals. It can be a general cultural component of how you run your business. But then also tell them, here's the instructions for when you review this. We would love to, have you suggest any improvements, any best practices, anything that you see in the proposal that you think would benefit us in the future. Tell us about it. So just be explicit, communicate with them.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think being explicit, really asking what you need. And I think it also helps. You're asking for information that's not there, right? What are we missing? It also helps by sending the question along, especially if it's a more descriptive text. It helps. And this is what we've been trying to answer. Jane also mentions the following to Wilke's question, saying, I provide a checklist to reviewers asking, does the proposal convey X? Is the approach clear?
I love that. I love that. Because that helps, Jane, that's so good, because that helps ground your reviewers in these things. Because when you're reviewing a ginormous document, or even if it's a smaller document, because there's a lot of text there, it's easy to lose sight of certain things. So the fact they have a checklist and they have it next to them as they're reviewing, that's excellent, because it helps accomplish two things. It helps them stay grounded on what they need to do, and it gives you a sanity check to make sure that, hey, I did address all the things that I was responsible for. So I think that's fabulous. I love checklists. I'm a big checklist person.
Wilke, look Jane up on LinkedIn, and maybe you can get her checklist from her. That would be sharing some love in the Christmas period.
Yeah, we do have a checklist, actually. Yes, you're right.
Great. Any other questions? I think that is all from our amazing audience. Then we're all able to give you a few minutes back in your day. Thank you so much, Olivia. I really enjoyed it. I see people enjoyed it. I think we had some great tips in there, and it will really help people to win those proposals. That's what we're all about. I think good luck, everyone, with the last few weeks. I hope everybody gets some time off, can enjoy some festivities, and we're keen to kick it off again in the new year. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Altura, and thank you to everyone that joined, that asked questions, shared some best practices. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, and happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.